To the cloud. All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Tammy Euliano. She is a professor of anesthesiology and an author, and she's here to talk to us a little bit about her journey from medical educator to fiction author, which is quite a pivot. So we're excited to learn about that today. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Tammy, so give us some background. How did we get here? Tell us a little bit about yourself in that journey.
So I am from Florida and came up to Gainesville for college a long time ago, and wanted to do medical research, I thought. And somebody said, oh, if you want to do that, you need to go to medical school. So I said, okay, I'll go to medical school, which I wasn't really enthused with at first. But I suffered through and finished, and in the meantime was doing research and realized I didn't actually like killing rats and doing real basic research. So I switched to education. And so I spent the first 10 years of my career very involved with education, mostly using a full-scale human patient simulator that I helped to build when I was a medical student. And so I taught, and then kind of got stale on that. And so I started being pushed up the ladder of residency administration. So I became the residency program director, and about 5 years into that, realized I was absolutely miserable. I was walking with my then 15, 16-year-old daughter on the beach. And I said, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, oh, I don't know. And she's very, very bright. And so I said, well, have you considered medicine? And she said, why would I do that? You hate your job. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I bringing home to my kids? Because I love taking care of patients, but the administration stuff was just soul crushing. So maybe a year later, for our 20th anniversary, my husband and I went hiking in Sedona, and somehow I just sort of had an epiphany on one of the trails and said, you know what, I don't have to do this. I can do what I love to do. And then I just had to figure out what that was. So in the meantime, I started writing a book with my mentor. We wrote a textbook for anesthesia. And when we finished that, he said, let's keep going. Let's write something else. And he said, how about fiction? And it hadn't ever, I mean, I liked it when I was a kid, but I read voraciously, but I never really thought much about trying to write a novel. But so he and I started one, and here's this 82-year-old German man and me, a 30-something American, writing a fiction novel together. And we had a blast with it, but he fell ill and passed away. But then I had the bug. So then I knew what I was going to do when I was brave enough to back off my administrative career. And on that hike, we decided it was time. So I literally within a month, I had resigned from being program director, resigned from being chief of OB anesthesia, started closing up my research projects, and went down to 60% clinical and started writing.
So how long did it take you from the initial thought of that first fiction novel to the completion? Like, how long did it take you? How many years or months or?
From beginning writing to getting it published was 7 years. Okay. But the original book, the one that I finally got published, probably took me 5 years to write and rewrite and rewrite again, because it's interesting. Reading is awesome, but then when you sit down with a blank page and start to write, you realize this is a whole different skill set from being a professional writer. You know, I had written, I don't know, hundreds of articles and a textbook, and it was not even close to the same thing, even though it's still a computer and a screen and a keyboard. It's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, you know, textbooks, or, you know what I mean? Not that I've ever written a textbook, but we've written books on, you know, things that you know, or things that are even like self-help books, you know, are so, to me, like self-help books, text type things, you know, like information, versus complete fiction is like, it's a world of difference. It's a world of difference in writing those items.
And it kind of literally is, because you're building a completely different world. You're creating new people and places. And it was quite daunting when I realized that there was no right answer. You know, when I do medicine, for the most part, there's a right way and a wrong way. There's variations on the right way, but in fiction, it's anything you want to do. And it's a matter of appealing to people. And this sort of amorphous people is a little hard to appeal to. So
Right.
it's been very challenging and
Well,
fun.
and I think one of the things with fiction too, versus when you're writing, like I said, like text or something that's straight, like an article, or, you know, that's very straightforward and linear, like you have to make those pieces connect because it's something that doesn't exist and it's not in this sort of real time or this continuous motion. You know, there are different stops and gaps in time and things like that. So it becomes really interesting when you try to write fiction, keeping it cohesive, you know?
Yes. And I've probably made just about every mistake in the cohesiveness that you can. I'm sure I'll find more to make, but yes, the challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my real question, and this is what I've been dying to ask you, is how do you consider that your skill set didn't fit your job when you were so good at your job, right? To me, I'm thinking, well, it seems like her skill set fit that because you look how, well you did in that career, on that career path. So how do you interpret that?
The reason I thought it didn't fit my skill set was at the end of the day, I was absolutely drained, like emotionally spent, short-tempered with my family. Just, it wasn't energizing and making me feel like I was doing a great job. Instead, I was constantly debating whether I was making the right decisions. I'm a people pleaser, so I was always upset because every decision I made was helping somebody and hurting somebody else. It was never you make one decision and everybody goes, yay, what a great choice. Instead, the faculty are angry because I'm helping the residents too much, or the residents are angry because I'm making them work too hard. And just, no good deed goes unpunished was sort of my daily experience. And I think the skill set that I don't know, you could think of it as a skill or a lack of skill, but I see gray everywhere. I'm not a real black and white thinker. And I think for being a residency program director, I had 88 residents that I was trying to usher through their training for 4 years. And you need to be able to go, that's wrong, that's right. And it was all these interpersonal, and I wanted to hear it from both sides. And maybe there's a reason why he behaved the way he did. And eventually you just go, play nice in the sandbox and quit bringing me these whiny things.
Right. No drama, no drama.
Well, I mean, so it's almost like it doesn't matter if you're good at something. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the skill set that you possess, right? Because anybody can almost, well, not anyone, but you can learn things and become good at them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's your inner skill set. Is that kind of where we're going?
I think that's true. And I read everything I could on how to handle difficult conversations and how to manage my time so that I could get through things faster. And I enjoyed reading and learning about it, but the implementation was not as smooth as I would have liked. And I think exactly what you said, you could be good at it, but if it doesn't give you energy and give you sort of positive reinforcement and positive feelings, then it still may not be the right path for you.
Feed your spirit. It doesn't feed your spirit in essence. So it's not the right path. I get it. Because I just want to acknowledge that you were good at what you did and what you do. You're still practicing in some cases, correct?
Yes, I still practice anesthesia and I still teach residents and medical students, but I'm not in charge anymore. So I get to do my job and finish and go home. And when they irk me because they aren't as willing to look things up and follow through as I would like, I just do it myself and tell them I don't think they did it right, but I don't have to write down their scores and be the bad guy.
Right. So
now I have a question. So you talked about seeing the world in very much gray, right? So now you're writing fiction. Now you're putting things into sort of finality. Do you see yourself finding black and white when you're writing fiction versus the gray that happens in real life?
That's a really interesting question, because when I read, I like my bad guy to be bad, no question. And I like my good guy to be the knight in shining armor. And as I've written, I debate about that. I want to give my bad guy a logical reason to be a bad guy, not just he was born evil and he's always evil. And so, I'm adding gray to my original version of these people, which is, that's a really interesting point. but at some point things have to happen. You have to make a decision whether he's going to turn left or right, and what he's going to see next. And it can't be this wishy-washy stuff that I do in my interpersonal skills. So yeah, maybe it's making me better at making decisions.
Well, let me ask you, what about, I mean, I'm sure you're not the first person to ever feel this way. I mean, there are probably plenty of people who feel the exact same way you did when you were standing on that path or that beach with your daughter. Now, what is your advice to them? I mean, not everybody has a situation where they can pivot their job a little bit and continue to make money and still, so how do you deal with that if you're, kind of in one job that you can't quite quit, but you are not quite right. Like that skill set is not a match.
And I've never been in, as I call it, the real world. I've always been in academic medicine. And certainly there, without leaving my job, I can pivot a little bit. I can shift away from administration and head more toward clinical. I can stop doing research if I'm too frustrated with that avenue. And one of my mentors always says you should reinvent yourself every 10 years, which doesn't necessarily mean quitting your job and starting a new one, but shifting your focus toward something different. And so I think, I mean, even my kids, who are, one of them's in the real world now, after 2 years, he's ready to start focusing somewhere else, but he's not going to leave his job. He's just going to start trying to shift to a different position within the same company that plays more to his interests and things. I think talking to people about what you're good at, like you have a thought of what you're good at, but it's not always what other people realize you're good at. And so I think it's helpful to get feedback from people who will give you honest answers. And then also, I think there's a lot to be said for what energizes you and what makes you feel drained. And not that there's anything wrong with hard work. I absolutely don't have any problem with working incredibly hard, but at the end of the day, I want to feel like I accomplished something, and I want those I don't know, good vibes. I'm not a real squishy person like that, but
yeah, I think one of the things too, like if you find yourself waking up every morning going, I don't want to do this job, or I don't want to go to work, or I don't want to go in, and it's I mean, we all do that once in a while, right? But when you find it's consistent, it's definitely time to make some sort of life change or job change or whatever it is that's not working for you, right? But when you shift, when you're shifting like completely to a different sort of realm, right? How was that transition? Did you feel like your writing, like your foundational skills gave you skills to shift? So like the things you learned throughout your career, which regardless of what part of your career, like you were writing articles for medical, did you feel it helped you build a foundation for writing for when you went into fiction? Does your path sort of build to where you're going next as you find things you enjoy through life?
I think the biggest thing that helped me pivot, and I think would help anyone pivot, is a curiosity and a desire to learn. So any direction you go, the foundation is that you learn about it, and also a humility about it. Being a big important doctor seems like, oh, I should be able to do anything, but in fact, writing has just as much background knowledge that is not intuitive as being a doctor does, or being a lawyer, or being a plumber. There's a lot you have to learn to be good at it, and you have to have that humility to step back and start from the beginning. Ideally, you don't quit your existing job while you start researching the next job, so that it's not 100% dependent on you making money, right? They tell us as writers that your best bet is not to plan on your career being writing. Otherwise, you have to write what will make you money instead of writing what you are interested in. But my writing is very much medical mystery kind of stuff. And so it has a lot of my career in it as well. And the people that I've interacted with.
Right. Yeah. And to sort of the point I was trying to make is, you having that background in medical and writing about medical, like you almost need that foundation to really be good. So what happens is you're sort of, as you're evolving, or the way I see it, as you're evolving, you're bringing those things in your life together that you're really enjoying to create something new for yourself, like, writing medical fiction, so.
Yeah. There was a book I read a very long time ago, and I absolutely won't remember the name, but it was, the point was that every couple hours, you have an alarm that goes off and you write down what you're doing and how you feel about it. And that eventually, if you do that for a week, you figure out what things made you feel good and what tasks didn't. And then you try and shift your work so that you do more of the things that you enjoy and less of the things that you hate. And I thought that was an interesting process. And certainly creativity is something I enjoy. But then I also enjoy sitting around playing with spreadsheets, which is like not in any way the same, or writing computer programs or throwing the ball for my dogs. You know, there's going to be a huge variety of things that you enjoy. And now I stand outside with a chuck it and a ball and 2 dogs, and I type on my computer until my dog brings the ball back to me, except that she doesn't bring it back to me. She hides it under a bush, and then I have to go on an Easter egg hunt.
That's more fun for the dogs.
For the dogs. Yeah, they're like, let's see who's the smart one here. She's gonna go find the ball.
It is not me. Yes, I play fetch as much as she does.
Well, I really, I'm just really blown away by, I always love when people pursue something. And do you think that you would have taken up writing as a hobby if this was not in the cards for you? Would this have been something that you just enjoyed? There's my co-host today. Do you think this is something you would have taken up as a hobby if you couldn't pursue it in this way?
Yes and no. And they say you should only write if you're willing to write, even if nobody's ever going to read it. I think if I were writing not for general consumption, it would be more my thoughts on political issues, not political, but like medical political issues. Some of the same things I put into my fiction, Right to Die and that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't spend time making characters and world. I don't think I would have really discovered how much I love it. And I definitely feel the need to share what I write. I want it to impact other people's lives. And maybe that's really self-serving. It's not the money, it's I like it when people read it and go, wow, I really liked so-and-so, and that stuck with me after I read it. And it better not be the money, because you don't make money being an author unless you're a lead child or.
Yeah, we say that all the time. You don't really make a lot of money writing books.
No, even the textbook we wrote was, he told me, my mentor told me before I wrote it, he said, if we get 25 cents an hour out of this, we are doing great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, what you mentioned there about just having people say something, I think that's like a human thing. I don't know. Is that a people pleaser thing? Because I'm a people pleaser too. I don't know if that's like a validation thing, but that validation is almost better than the money, just kind of like, your ideas are cool. Oh my goodness. I am just, I really think that that's important as humans. Do you feel that that's everyone? I mean, Brian, do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think when, I know with some of my books, when people like, wow, I read that and it changed the way I thought about something, or even recently when I was in Florida, I came across someone that read one of my fiction novels, and they were like, okay, I was really happy it turned out that way, because I wasn't really sure at first. And I'm like, okay, that's a good thing. So when you get that feedback, it does, to me, it does make you go, okay, what's the next thing I need to create for it? So someone else saw my vision, not just myself,
Yeah. I did a book club with actually my book club, and it was so interesting to hear because I'm not much of a describer. I don't like to read descriptions. And so I didn't spend a lot of time describing the world. I was picturing Gainesville, which of course I didn't name it. And so to hear their vision of what the characters looked like and the interactions, I do a lot of it in dialogue, and to hear what they ended up thinking of those people it's so cool, because they're made up. And yet they did a pretty good job of, imagining somebody that I had created. And then the next part is reading the reviews, which a friend of mine told me to stop reading them, and I'm glad I did. But the reviews that are, oh, I just love this character and I can't wait to see what she does next. And then all of a sudden that's a huge amount of pressure that I am true to that character in the sequel, and not, I don't ruin her for my readers.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's always going. And, I think it also helps, like when people, it's interesting, because when people are interested in it, it also gives you, to me, it gives you motivation to go, okay, let me get up and let me write that next part, or I'm really tired today, let me go and work on this for an hour or whatever the case, and always making constant progress. Now, here's my question for you, because we make up characters, right? And I always say, like, my characters live in my head, and I'm just basically now transporting them into other people's heads. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you find that, like, they actually live, like, you wind up thinking about them, right? Regardless of whether you're writing, you wind up thinking about these characters, where they're going, what's happening, or where they will be. Because I know I do. And I sort of find it interesting when that gets transported to other people, where they're now thinking about these characters and where they're going and what's happening.
Yeah. One thing that I had read about and thought it was crazy until it happened to me is the characters, even though they're completely a construct of my imagination, sort of take on their own life. I'll be writing and I'll go, okay, now Kate's going to do this. And I start to write it and it just doesn't work.
Right.
And it's almost like she's going, I would never do that, you idiot. Take me this way. And it's so funny that beyond my imagination, they've sort of formed their own little 3D selves. And then they're almost communicating through me instead of the other way around. It's bizarre.
Right. Like, I'm always like, they exist somewhere. I mean, I know it's in my brain only, but they exist somewhere, and their existence is in there, and I've created them in there. And now they sort of live, rent free in my head. It's sort of what happens.
Yeah. I guess they're just maybe more formed under my consciousness than I realize.
Right.
And so it's really interesting how they sort of go their own direction, and you go, you know what, you're right. That's you would not do this, you would do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, is there any bit of wisdom you'd like to impart on us before we let you go and find out where we can get your book? Is there anything you want to share with us, or for that person who is kind of thinking, maybe I'm not being true to myself?
I think the biggest thing is trying to realize where your calling is, if you feel that way, or where your passions lie. And I think it's so easy as we get out of school and start making money and get into the joy, but also the rut of raising children and going to work every day, that we just sort of say each day is going to be like the next, and not think about the fact that there are other options. And this whole idea of reinventing yourself every 10 years, or I just read a book called Think Again by Adam Grant, and he talks about the you that you imagined you would be is not always the you you're meant to be. And that it's important to sort of take new inventory, because you change, your goals change, and maybe you could be way happier and a better asset to society if you let yourself explore other options. It doesn't mean you quit your job and say, I'm going to find myself.
Right.
You don't get to do that after your gap year or whatever that is that people do now. But that doesn't mean that you don't have spare time, that instead of watching TV or playing a video game or whatever, that you can't start thinking about what energizes when you're in that flow state, if you've heard of that term, and recognizing that there's ways to leverage that, and maybe find a different career, or even if it's just a hobby, but something that's gonna fire you up and get your juices flowing and make your life happier and more rewarding.
Yeah. I always say, I think the most boring people are ones that don't have hobbies. I'll be honest. Like, they are, like, if you don't have a hobby, it's just, I don't know.
We are all multifaceted, and it's important to explore the different facets.
Well, Tammy, tell us what is the name of your book, and tell us more about that.
The name of the book is Fatal Intent, and it's by Tammy Euliano. I don't have a pen name. And it's available wherever you get books. It's published by Ocean View. It's Kindle and hardcover and Audible right now, and then the paperback comes out in next March, and the sequel is underway. It's due in -4 months, so I'm writing furiously.
Okay, there you go. You're on the countdown. You're on the clock now for that.
I'm on a clock that I need to go faster than the speed of light. I also have a website that's just my first initial and last name, and it has some short stories on there that are, some of them are fun, some of them are thought-provoking, I think. yeah, and if people want to contact me, I'm happy to talk about anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for following your passion.
Great to meet you.
You too.